Howdy there, welcome back to the channel. My name's Evan, or EJ, you can call me either one, and today I'm going to be reviewing Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is the third Ant-Man movie, and I believe the 31st movie in the MCU, but I could be wrong about that, I'm not entirely sure. So, with that being said, let's get into the review. This is definitely a movie. It's for sure, it's a movie, and that's that's about it. Uh, I'll explain it in more detail, but those are my thoughts on it. Pretty much, it's a movie, but I'll go into more detail here. So the movie starts with a flashback to Janet stuck in the quantum realm, and that's where she meets Kang for the first time. And all I can really say is it's a nice little scene to open the movie on. It's a good way to introduce us to Kang and show that him and her, Kang and Janet, have some kind of history that we don't really find out about fully until later in the movie. But that's really all I have to say about it. It's just a nice scene. So after that, we catch up with Scott for the first time since Endgame, and it seems like in that time he's become a bit of a celebrity. Because if you remember in Endgame, those kids at the diner didn't even know who Ant-Man was, but now there's like Ant-Man merch. People recognize him on the street. He wrote a book about himself, which is interesting. Um, I did think that scene in the car was funny whenever he's listening to the audio version of the book and he's talking about how he got to meet a talking raccoon. Uh, which I thought was funny. And speaking of that scene in the car, they're on the way back from picking Cassie up from jail, which apparently Cassie got arrested in a peaceful protest, which is interesting. And she has her own suit now, which is something. I I know that in the comics she becomes a superhero named Stature, I believe. So it could be interesting to see if she does kind of take up that role later on in the movies. That's about all I had to say about that. Really, I'm trying not to be overly negative right now because I have thoughts about this movie, but I can't get into it until later in the review because later in the movie is when my more negative thoughts come. But yeah. So after that scene in the car, they go back to the house and they meet up with Janet and Hank. And I have a complaint here. This could just be me, but to me it seems like Hank acts like a completely different character than he was in the other two movies. Like in the other two, he seemed like this kind of like cynical, kind of like bitter old scientist dude. I don't know if that's the best way to describe him, but he was a bit more rough around the edges, I think is the best way to put it. But in this one, he's just like the easygoing, fun grandpa who's always just walking around like, I like ants. Like, what? It couldn't be that hard to keep his character consistent, right? Like, what went wrong? I guess some people could say it's character development, but we never see that character development. It just kind of happens. So I genuinely believe it's just the writers being inconsistent, and it did bother me a bit in the movie, among other things, which I'll get into in a bit. But yeah, I feel like Hank is pretty much just a completely different character. So after that scene, we get a scene of all of them in the basement messing with this machine Cassie and Hank built that lets them contact the quantum realm. And here's where I have another complaint. So Janet starts like freaking out and saying that they shouldn't be contacting the quantum realm and no one should be messing with it. No, she doesn't want anyone near the quantum realm, right? Here's the thing though. Literally the last time we saw Janet prior to this movie, what was she doing? That's right, she sent Scott to the quantum realm to gather like I don't know, information or something. I can't remember exactly what they were doing in the quantum realm, but that's where Scott got stuck for 5 years. and that's how he helped save the day in Endgame. So that's another bit of an inconsistency between movies here. Um, it's really bizarre, dude. Like, I would get it if it was like forever ago and she had had a bunch of appearances in between now and then, but this was literally the last time we saw her. She was perfectly fine with sending Scott in there, but now she doesn't want anyone going anywhere near it. It's it's just so weird to me. But yeah, this is the point in the movie where they all get sucked into the quantum realm, which is something. And after they get sucked into the quantum realm, here's where we get to one of my big problems with the movie. Uh, it's 95% green screen. It's so much green screen. And normally, I'm not the type to really care about, a movie being primarily green screen, but for some reason, it just felt like painfully like apparent in this movie, and I don't really know why, but the whole movie I was just very like focused on the fact that what I'm looking at is not real, and that did kind of take me out of it a bit, which normally isn't a problem. I feel like it could have helped if they built some of the sets practically. I know they couldn't have done this whole thing practically, because if you watch this movie you'll understand that like there's just some of the stuff that can't be done practically, but I feel like at least 40% of it being done practically would have helped this like improve drastically. But like, uh, and the green screen doesn't look amazing. Like you can tell a lot of the times the actors can't, they don't know what they're supposed to be looking at, and that's another reason I think it's a problem. But yeah, that's one of my bigger issues with the movie is just that most of it is green screen. I will say that one of my positives for the movie is this little fella, Veb. I really liked him. I thought he was a fun character. Every time he, whenever he was asking how many holes they have, I thought it was funny. I know a lot of people find that kind of like MCU-ish humor like kind of boring at this point, or just like not funny. But it got some laughs out of me. So there's that. Also, apparently, he was voiced by David Dastmalchian, which is great because I really like David Dastmalchian. I don't know why they couldn't have just have him come back to play Kurt, which is another one of my problems with this movie, is that Luis and Kurt are nowhere to be seen, and I guess Dave too, but to a lesser extent. Those guys are literally like the best part of the other two Ant-Man movies, and they just ditched them for this one. That makes me so mad because they are some of the funniest characters in this entire franchise, and they just were absent. That genuinely makes me so upset. William Jackson Harper was good in this movie. I believe his character's name was Quaz, I think. I think that's what it was. But again, it's been over a week since I watched it, and I was really tired when I watched it. But yeah, he was good. His character could like read minds, which was pretty funny. They had a few good gags with that. I feel like they kind of wasted him though, William Jackson Harper, because he's a good actor. And let's be real, we're probably never gonna see this character again, or at least I'll be really surprised if we do. Also, this isn't a fan casting video, but I think William Jackson Harper would be a pretty good Reed Richards. Just saying. And now we're at another one of my negatives. Oh wait, hang on, give me just a second. So for a movie called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Wasp doesn't do a single thing this entire movie. She is just such a non-character throughout this whole thing. I don't know why that is. Like, I don't know what caused that. Like, whether they just kind of forgot to write anything for her, or they just didn't want to, or something like that. But it it's very obvious whenever you're watching the movie that like they just didn't have anything for her to do. Like Janet's more important in this movie than Hope is, and Hope's name is in the title of the movie. And I just think that's really bizarre, but whatever. Honestly, an unexpected positive of this movie for me was Bill Murray. I wasn't really expecting to like him, but I actually really enjoyed his presence in this movie. It's very minor. He's only in it for like a few minutes, but whenever I heard that he was cast in this movie, I was kind of expecting him to just kind of, I don't know, I don't know how to describe, just kind of like treat it like lesser work and like not really care. But like for the most part, it seemed like he actually played it pretty straight and kind of actually cared about the material. So that actually surprised me a lot, and I really enjoyed that. So that's a positive. Now another surprise in this movie for me was Modoc. I know a lot of people don't like how they handled Modoc in this movie, and I do have my gripes with it. However, the the main okay, how do I word it? So there were two things, or not two things. Okay, I need to figure out how to word this. Okay, there are certain things in this movie that I had a whole lot of fun with. Now there's about like a half an hour segment somewhere like halfway through the movie where I had a ton of fun. But the other thing that I had a ton of fun with was Modoc. I thought he was easily the most entertaining part of this movie, except for one thing that I thought was a little weird towards the end. I'll get into that. But for the most part, I feel like he was the most enjoyable thing in this movie by far. Um, like even his like I don't know. I feel like Corey Stoll just really got to like ham it up and have some fun with this. Because like first of all, he's playing a giant head in a floating chair, so you could probably act as goofy as you want when you're acting that. So that's one thing. But also, some of the lines they give him are just really goofy in like a fun way. So I really enjoyed that. Um, like even whenever Scott was talking to him over like their earpiece, and he was just like Darren, Darren, and he just wouldn't reply, and then he finally went Modoc, and then he finally replied. Like that made me chuckle. I thought it was fun, so I had a surprising amount of fun with Modoc in this movie. I feel like now is as good a time as any to say that Jonathan Majors is really good as Kang. However, there are certain things they do with the character of Kang in terms of the writing and how everything is handled that worry me a little bit for the future of this character. Uh, and I'll get into those things in just a little bit. Uh, but yeah, I'm slightly concerned about how Kang is going to be handled going forward. So remember just a little bit earlier when I said there was like a half an hour to 40-minute segment about halfway through the movie that I had a ton of fun with? Yeah, it's from the time Scott and Kang meet to about the end of the sequence with the probability storm or whatever it was called. First of all, the scene where Kang and Ant-Man meet for the first time is without a doubt my favorite scene in the movie. It's like the only time in the movie where I felt any real tension. Like I, I just it's the only time I was really like, ooh, this is interesting. Like I'm invested in this. But it's also one of the only times, well, not one of the only times, but it's where I felt Kang seemed the most threatening in this movie. But then also after that, that scene where Scott goes into, I think it was called a probability storm. I could be wrong though, but I thought that was a very fun sequence. Like just seeing all the different versions of him. Excuse me. Especially that one that just still worked at Baskin Robbins, and all the other ones were in Ant-Man suits. I thought that was really fun. And even them still having his name tag say Jack instead of Scott, I thought that was a fun little detail. Um, yeah, just that whole section from Scott meeting Kang to the end of that section with the probability storm is my favorite little stretch of time in this movie, without a doubt. I think that's the most invested I was the entire time. Pretty much all other times I was kind of checked out, which really makes me sad, to be honest. Now I want to talk just a little bit more about MODOK. Two things. You know what I wasn't expecting to see going into this movie? MODOK's bare rear end. I didn't need to see that, but I guess I have now, and that's just up here. So thanks for that, Marvel Studios. You guys are awesome. But also, I want to talk about the the arc that MODOK has at the end of this movie. It feels like it kind of comes out of left field. Like, I never would have guessed before this movie, or even like halfway through this movie, that they would try to give MODOK a redemption arc. So it did feel a little forced at the end. However, it did lead to what I believe to be one of the funniest lines in the movie, in "At least I died an Avenger," and then Scott just being like, "Yeah, sure." I thought that was really funny. Um, it's just it really was just such a weird choice, because like even in the first Ant-Man movie, he didn't seem like a character that would change for the better. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just such a weird, out of left field redemption arc, and it felt kind of unearned. However, it did lead to a kind of funny moment. So whatever. It's not like, I don't know. It's not like the movie would it be any better if it wasn't there. But I don't know. Now I want to talk about an issue that I didn't even think about until I saw Coy Jandro pointed out on a Real Rejects live stream. Towards the end of the movie, whenever Scott's been really big the whole time, and then Cassie also gets really big, well, really big, uh, and they hug it out, and then they both get normal sized again. She says, uh, "I need a lime" or something like that. It's a callback to when Scott said, "Does anyone have any orange slices?" whenever he got big in Civil War. However, they're not really big. They're in the quantum realm, so they're like microscopically tiny still. They're just big in comparison to everything else in the quantum realm. So that doesn't really make any sense. Now, is this technically nitpicking? Yeah, sure. Do I care? No. It I didn't notice it when I watched the movie, but now that I know about it, it really bugs me, and I can't. I don't know. It it doesn't sit right with me. And speaking of things that don't sit right with me, Kang the Conqueror, the man that is supposed to be the next big Thanos level threat for the MCU, who has a movie named after him and is probably going to be a threat in at least two or three more of these things. That guy, yeah, he gets overpowered by some ants. I've seen the argument to be made that, like, oh, but they're like really advanced, smart ants. They're still ants. And this guy is Kang the Conqueror, someone who can destroy timelines. And he got defeated by ants. Well, maybe not defeated, but at least temporarily overpowered. And that's what I was referring to earlier when I said I had some issues with the way Kang was handled and how he's going to be handled going forward. How are we supposed to see this guy as the next big threat that's going to be like universe ending, like kill all the Avengers type thing, whenever he got overpowered by Scott Lang and some ants? I can't. Listen, I'm still excited for the next few Avengers movies. I'm still gonna be watching them. Like, I'll be in the theaters day one or whatever. So at the end of the day, they still have my money. It doesn't really matter. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't much less threatened by Kang now. Like, Thanos never did anything that made me less threatened by him. Like, I always saw Thanos as a threat, and now I'm just kind of seeing this version of Kang as the guy who's probably going to kill some characters I like, but also the guy that got overpowered by six-legged bugs. So, yeah, I wasn't really a fan of that. Also, while I'm on the topic of Kang, I forgot to mention it earlier, but he pretty much confirms that he has killed a variant of Thor, or probably multiple, if we're being honest. So that kind of helps make him a bit more intimidating, because Thor's no joke. Thor is very, very powerful. So that's something, at least. I did find that to be a bit of an interesting little bit of lore that they dropped in there. But yeah. So now I need to talk about a scene towards the end of the movie that felt a little weird to me. So it's after they think they've defeated Kang. They've opened the portal to go back home. Hank goes through, Janet goes through, Hope goes through, Cassie goes through. No, Cassie's about to go through, but then Hank sees Kang running at them, so he pushes Cassie through, and the portal closes, and Kang and Scott fight for a bit, right? So they're down in the quantum realm. Eventually, the portal opens back up, and someone shoots Kang from off screen to save the day. They cut to the portal and reveal that it's Hope. Now, I'm not crazy in thinking that that definitely should have been Janet, right? Like, it seemed like it should have been Janet to kind of, like, redeem herself. Because, like, well, maybe not redeem herself is the best term, but, like, it seemed like that was meant to be her moment. Because, like, she kind of. This is. It's a bit tricky to word. Um, it just kind of felt like this movie was leading up to her having another confrontation with Kang, or like at least helping to stop Kang. And then they have the moment, and you think it's going to be Janet, and it's Hope. I'm not crazy in thinking that, right? Like, I'm not alone. Everyone else felt that too, right? Maybe I'm just insane, but I don't know. I thought that that felt weird. Okay, and then we get to the post-credit scene, which is essentially just setting up the Council of Kangs and letting you know that there's more of them coming and that Kang is still an oncoming threat. Uh, normally I feel like a post-credit scene teasing the Council of Kangs would have gotten me really excited, but it being attached to this movie, which I already didn't really care for, on top of it feeling kind of goofy like in a not good way. I can't really put my finger on it, but something about the post credit scene just didn't really click for me. I don't really know what it is, but yeah, it just didn't work all that well for me. I know there's a second one, but I didn't stay for it because I was tired. And I've heard it's not really as important as the first one, so whatever. I probably wouldn't really have that much to say about it anyway. So, yeah, that's my review for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Look, I don't think it's a bad movie. I had some fun with it, but I feel like there was so much potential for there to be something great here. Like I could just feel it. And also, it really hurts me uh, to say that I wasn't a huge fan of this movie because I have been such a defender of the Ant-Man movies. I think the first one is one of the best movies in the MCU, and I like the second one. I don't like it as much as the first one, but I still think it's a fun time. But I'm sad to say that I just think this trilogy has gotten like worse and worse with each release, which makes me really sad. Uh, Probably give it like a 5.5 out of 10, I guess. You know, it's not terrible, but it's not great either. It's just kind of a movie that exists. So that's about all I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications if you don't want to miss my next upload. I upload every Sunday, or at least I try to. That's about all I've got for you today. See ya.